All right, I think we'll get started. Thanks for making it out. You guys are awesome because you're early birds and here to get the worms and all that stuff. So today we're going to talk about building a great team, and I promise no gimmicks. You can call me out if I sound gimmicky, but we'll talk through that. The purpose of that is I think there's a lot of words that get thrown around about building teams and phrases and, quick tips, things like that. It's definitely challenging, so we can agree to that if you're involved. Who's involved with building teams or being a part of that kind of, it's definitely challenging, so it's always going to be a lot of work. And so today I wanted to talk through a few items related to that and try to eliminate the gimmicks. But number one we're going to hit on is the team misconceptions, some of those misconceptions about teams, and this is from the perspective of a lot of persons on a team, any of us on a team. What makes a healthy team, and then jump into how to be a great teammate, again some more perspective, and then kind of how this can become the competitive advantage to having well-working teams. Doesn't mean everything goes perfect. There's still challenges with projects, as we know, and we'll do Q&A. And I would say too, feel free to ask questions throughout. Let's keep it super intimate from that standpoint. So I'm Shrop. I work at MediaCurrent, and I'm the open source security lead by title. But like a lot of us in our roles, I'm sure some of you in your roles, we wear many hats. And Tom's laughing because I know we talk about that. Like everybody winds up wearing different hats at different times. The text is small, but I do have the slides already on the website for Drupal Camp Atlanta. So feel free to download those, and you can read into the bio. I doubt you will, but it's there if you want it. And a little bit about MediaCurrent. So MediaCurrent was founded in 2007, and basically a full service digital agency with a focus on open source and making sure that we bring value to customers through the return on investment that they make. So really what that means is we want to make sure we show our clients what they're getting for their money. That's what it comes down to, what that value is. So that's always a challenge and something we look forward to. So I'm a big music fan. I'm a saxophone player. I play jazz and stuff like that. So I'm big into jazz. This is if you haven't heard of them, it's awesome. Hiromi is the pianist, and she's a jazz pianist and really awesome. And we've got Anthony Jackson on bass and Simon Phillips on drums. That's a jazz trio, 3 people making a lot of music. I'm not going to try to play it on the Wi-Fi's and stuff here, but encourage people to go check out that link. It's very talented, and that is, to me, a band is a lot about team, and that's really makes up what a team is about. So even though she's the kind of the star, maybe people go for that. You realize that they all 3 have their importance in what's going on musically. So let's jump into some of the misconceptions. So you hear this a lot. This is, to me, a little gimmicky when people say it. I don't think they intend it that way. They mean well, but you hear people say, there's no I in team. And yes, so I like to say, fact, true. There's technically no I in team. The thing I think that gets missed often, and I think we all feel this on teams, but we need to say it more so we understand. However, teams are still made up of individuals, and individuals bring value. So think about if everybody on your team was a clone of you, that would probably be pretty rough because there's going to be things you are not good at. So I like to focus on strengths of teams, of teammates and stuff, and not kind of bring up the weaknesses, because if you just talk about strengths, you kind of know, like, hey, the gaps can be filled by other people. But that's, to me, focusing on that, hey, that person, each person brings their talents, their experience, and all those things to the team, and that's why, that's a big part of when you put together teams. You want to make sure that everyone's filling in something that's important for the projects or, whatever you're working on. And to me, all this talk really goes beyond development and Drupal and JavaScript and the stuff maybe we focus on in our day-to-days. It goes into building teams in communities and anything you're doing. So that's what, to me, is really fun about this kind of talk. This is real small text on the screen, but you can read it later. But some examples of praise coming through in our Slack channel, which I think is important. We'll talk about that. But the important thing here is the misconception. All of us can fall into it. We probably all have at different times. Maybe we fall into it now, but I can do it all myself. I definitely have been guilty of that. Can easily slip into that. In my mind, I can be bigger than I really am, and I have to sometimes check myself, realize that. Although I feel like I can do a lot of things, there's a couple of things are wrong with that. Number one, you probably can't do everything yourself. And certainly there's not enough hours. That's why we have teams, because we have to split things up to get things done. It can't take 2 years to launch a website and things like that in many cases. So you can't spread it out that far. And the other thing is there's an aspect we'll talk more about in a little bit later, but even if you can do it, there's the whole point of should you grow other people and give them the opportunity to grow by letting them do things, even if you can do it better. And I say yes to that. Another misconception somebody might have on a team, and this is not just leaders, but anybody on a team, and that is, I don't need to ask for help. This can be for many reasons. Maybe if somebody's self-conscious, it's about, people are going to think that I don't know things, or, maybe they think, well, I've been doing something for 20 years. I should know this, and I'm too embarrassed to ask, Lots of reasons we can think of, all those reasons that somebody might, but I really do think that this is accurate. The only mistake is not asking for help. And I've got an example here, and Kelly's in the room, but this is just an example from Slack and we've got a help channel at Media Current where people can jump in and ask for help. And it's usually less developer type help. It's usually more on the side of maybe IT and computer, or could be HR help, things, just question. It could be any kind of question. But somebody here, Ian, was asking about, software updates and how do I log into the App Store, and then Kelly came back with the answer. So I think that's real important, and it's a sign of maturity. And so what we try to do a lot of our leaders on teams at Media Current is just to continuously say it's okay to ask for help, and reinforce that so people understand that's part of the culture, and it's not in any way going to reflect on you if you ask a question. What reflects on you is usually when you don't ask a question, and later on you're like, well, I didn't ask the question, and things have gone, in maybe a direction that we didn't intend. And this is one that I think comes up a lot. A lot of us, and I would say myself included, people may not think I'm introverted. I definitely have an introverted side. There's times I can go very deep inside and not want to talk to people or interact. And there's times when I can get up and speak, and I enjoy doing that. But everyone has different levels of that. I don't think you are truly an introvert, extrovert, and I don't think it's cut and dry. I really believe we have shades of all that, in our lives and things for different reasons. But a lot of times people say, I can't do the team thing because I'm not outgoing, so that means they can't communicate. And I think how someone feels is how they feel. You got to start there. So that's how they feel. That's real to them. And all we can do is encourage them to interact more, to communicate more, and to just give them those tools to help do that. And a lot of that's really just reinforcement of the team helping each other out. But I really do think this is true. So while people are different with being an introvert, extrovert kind of thing from a team perspective or personally, there is a side to that where an introvert may be able to think deeply on things, and they may have a personality style that allows them to solve complex problems. So that may not be true for every introvert, but I think that was an interesting perception on that. So did any of those resonate as far as challenges that you've seen on teams? So I think see some nods. So I think we've all seen some of those things and probably felt them ourselves. So I definitely want to talk about what I think makes a healthy team. And so I don't know if it's a healthy team, but they got a cool van. So I grew up watching the ATeam, and the one thing that you really could take away, and I will say this, I was so excited when this came on Netflix or something, I think a couple of years ago, because in my mind, my kid mind, I was like, that show was awesome. It was fantastic. And I was so excited that when my daughter, I was like, Emily, we've got to watch. The A-Team's on. You're going to love this show. And we started the first season's episode 1 and started watching it. I'm like, this show's awful. It's like, it is not that great a show. But the one thing, though, is they definitely operated. I mean, it's in the title, but they operate as a team. They each provided their function to what they could do to pull things together and make the plan happen. So I think that's pretty neat. And they do have a cool van. I like the van. So I like to break things down a lot of times into 3s, but in my mind to help process and keep all these things together. And so I've kind of broken down what I think makes a healthy team and really just as an individual and working with other people in general into 3 things. And that's leadership. There's a component of leadership. There's a component of mentorship. And there's also a component of service. And so that's what we'll kind of dig into. So kind of on a leadership side of things, so team members lead. And this is interesting because I do a lot of experimentation on leadership, mentorship, and serving. I'm actively experimenting with teams and trying things and seeing what sticks and what kind of reaction I get from people, because I think it's a great chance to learn. And at times I actually let people know, hey, you've been part of an experiment or you're going to be. But you have to try things to see what works. And so this is the first one, all on a team can lead. This is one that really, I think, confuses people at first. They're very allergic to the idea that, oh, I could be a leader. I don't want to be a leader. What does that mean? Well, and I heard somebody last night mention, we were talking, I think maybe at the after party or something, but not everyone is actually, titles aren't important, right? So I'm a firm believer in that. So your title doesn't have to have leaders and manager, director, whatever to be a leader. Everyone can step up and lead. And sometimes you're not a leader all the time. The team member just steps up and leads a certain part of something, right? They just, they're leading a part of the project, some feature, some section of that, some front end section. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. And so as leaders, though, we also need to make sure we step up and give people opportunities to lead. This is a big thing we're really trying to work on at Media Current, is to grow leaders and to make sure that they see that they have opportunities. Not everybody's going to, lead in the same fashion or have that in them to do that. And sometimes they think they don't have it in them, and you see it, and you're like, I know that they can do this, and you just got to give them those opportunities. So we don't want that structure and whatever structure we set up in a team to be static. We want it to always be changing and growing and that sort of thing. And you really have to, this is really ultimately, and I know there's some squishy moments of this, some heart moments of this talk that feels maybe it's a little hard to apply, so you have to kind of take away and think about it. But ultimately, you're putting people first and you're caring about people. This is really what it comes down to. It's not, and that's something that's really kind of hard because it's squishy. It's hard to kind of like say, you got to go care about people. Well, what does that mean? So that's something we all have to kind of, I think, self-reflect on and think about what that means to us and how we can do that. But really, if you focus on putting people first, you're caring about them from that perspective. And I think that's what's important. To me, personally, what I do is I try to focus on taking pride and arrogance out of me and that helps get to that point. And again, giving leaders, good leaders give others a chance to lead. That's ultimately that part of that. And I really like this, breaking again this down a little bit. So what do leaders do? And this is all leaders, not by title. But they do lots of other things, but I really think these are key points. I think leaders listen. And I mean really listen, active listening. You hear about that, and that's a buzzword, that's gimmicky, but when I say active listening, I'm talking about you're not on your phone and going, yeah, and just nodding and stuff like that. This is really listening to what they're saying and trying to understand where they're coming from. And then also delegation. So you want to be able to delegate. Again, that's one that people easily say, you just need to delegate. These are things that you hear people say a lot. Just go delegate. Well, that's a challenge, right? Like, how do I delegate? Well, the first thing is if you start giving people a chance to lead, you're delegating because you're giving them additional responsibilities. So right there, that's one way you can start out by delegating if you're having a hard time doing it. And then you really have to protect your team. So good example of this, I think, that can come up quite a bit, is your team's working, everyone's doing their thing, and maybe a client came back and said they weren't happy with some aspect of something, on the project. And someone outside the team, could be somebody in a leadership position, could be somebody else up here on another project, and they say something about that. And they don't have perspective of what's going on. So as a leader, part of your job is to protect the team. And part of protecting the team, you don't lie about what happened, but you inform that person, this is why we're here. These are the mistakes we made. These are the misperceptions maybe the client has. This is the reality of it from my perception. And that's part of protecting the team. The team, most cases I don't think ever completely fails. I mean, it can happen. But most of the time, it's a mixture of things, and it's more complex. And so that's just an example that comes to mind, I think, for me. And I really like the thought that you want to protect each other in a positive manner. So kind of on the mentorship side, and you'll see this resonate a lot, because I really do believe everyone can, at some level, do these things, and it has a lot to do with personality and their will to do it and what they want to do and what they like to do, but everybody on a team can mentor. And I'm really trying to break down those walls of, and I like to talk about this, mentorship doesn't have to be someone that's, I don't like to think of myself as old, but I'm older than some people. But I don't think it's like all of a sudden you get to an age and all of a sudden you're wise and you've got gray hair and you can, now I can mentor, I've got this experience. I've been spinning things around a little bit and saying, hey, I want to be mentored. I've asked some of our youngest developers, I need you to mentor me on this thing I want to learn, this skill, because I'd like to learn more about it. And their heads spin, because they're like, what are you talking about, mentor? I'm like, no, seriously, I mean, talk me through, how did you get here? How do you think about things? How do you learn? How do you train? And they realize they can mentor also. So again, stepping up, kind of like the whole step up, like in leadership, we want to let people step up and have opportunities to mentor. And just, it's about sharing knowledge and experience, and carrying again back to it, about the growth of other people. So I think the main thing is mentorship can mean a lot of things to different people. Sometimes you can have short-term mentors that just help you through a problem and you're trying to get through something. And I think a lot of times in life we wind up having long-term mentors, and it's not always at work. It can be a lot of times outside of work, people we've worked with in the past, and you go back to them and have coffee with them and say, hey, I'm trying to work through this thing and figured out, what do you think? How have you dealt with this in the past? And I think all of that is valuable. So I think everybody should always have a list of the 3 people they consider mentors in their life and keep those people top of mind, and then ask those people, what can I do for you to help you out? How can I serve you? So that jumps into the next part, and that's serving. And probably should have had somebody, I don't have an icon for it, but somebody playing tennis and serving might have been funny, but it's the closest thing I could find. But so again, everybody can serve each other on a team, and that's really what we do. But I think when that service mindset is top of mind, it changes things. It changes how the teams operate. Because we serve each other by doing tasks and completing them and doing things well and having quality. But did you have a question?
Well,
yeah.
I was just going to, you mentioned.
No.
I just wanted to say, when I first saw it, I didn't get the serve, and then I thought about it, and I thought that's really a good icon for service, because everybody basically pulling their own weight is part of, at the very least, but everybody trying to do their share or more. So I was thinking that was a good one.
Yeah, this is, of the 3, leadership, mentorship, and serving, this is the one I think with the most ambiguity, because it can mean a lot of things to different people. But coming, like you said, coming from our perspective on a team approach, that service is just doing the work, doing whatever the project takes, and you're serving each other by fulfilling that. Now that service can change and morph into other things. It could be that someone on your team's going through some tough times personally, and it turns into a mentorship type thing, and there's trust. You've built trust with each other on a team, and this isn't all this stuff takes time to build. You're talking about building relationships, and it takes time to build. And this reminds me of, Kelly, 2 of the 3 Musketeers. Kelly's here today, and Sam's in the back of the room, but they did a presentation yesterday talking about friends inside my computer. They have a trust between the 3 of them that is unbreakable. There's a trust that they can say things to each other they wouldn't say in front of me, they wouldn't say in front of others, but they can say to each other because they have built that trust, and that takes time to do. And I think that leads into the service. Like, I think they would do anything for each other that they could to help each other out. So I think that's, again, this is getting squishy, and I get kind of goosebumps because it's all good Philly kind of stuff. But I think we're humans. We all feel that. There's that part of us. We know that that's real. And I think from a practical standpoint, building the team, the no gimmicks, how do you do this? Well, you help others even when you're busy. It is so easy, and I can fall in this trap. I'm busy. I'm maxed out. I'm on all these projects, whatever the excuse is, right? Ultimately, they're excuses. We choose what we want to do. We choose the time we spend on things. Where you spend your money is your priority in life. Look at that. That's a tough one, right? Where you spend your time is your priorities in life. Same thing happens on your teams. So I have to break myself of that. Like, someone says they need help, I either want to make sure that someone on the team's helping them, someone else steps up. I don't want to be the answer always because I don't have all the answers. But I also want to make sure that I'm not just not helping because I feel like I'm busy and they're on their own, because that doesn't help, because they'll help me next time, and it's a reciprocal kind of thing. And I feel like in this community, in the Drupal community in general, like I don't feel like this happens a lot, whether it's community stuff, open source, and I feel like a lot of the companies represented here, the people that I know even in this room that work for different agencies or companies, I really don't feel like this happens usually, but occasionally this will happen. Someone will utter the words somewhere, "That's not my job," and I just think there's other ways. There's our realities of that. Like, it may not make sense for you to do something, but I think when someone just says, "That's not my job," that comes off in a way that sounds like you're setting maybe unhealthy boundaries. You got to set boundaries on things like that, but I really don't like to hear that, because it just kind of sounds like I'm shutting things down. Whereas that conversation might be more real, like, hey, that's not my expertise, but guess what? I know someone who dealt with that same technical problem last month, and I think you should talk to them. That changes the tone. That you've created trust at that point with that person. So I think that's awesome. So let's jump into, I'm going to check my time. We're doing good. How to be a great teammate. And by the way, I know the title is Building Teams, but you notice all of these things start with the perspective of each team member. So we're talking about how do you communicate to each team member how to do that. And I've got a cat. You cannot train cats to do this. I don't know how this happened. This has to be photoshopped, but just to point out that that part of it is we all need to remember we all have individual skills and experience and all the stuff we talked about earlier, and that aids in, we have a place on a team. And this goes back to the I in team. Like, I get that phrase, and people say there's no I in team, but we're all not the same. It's not, most of our teams, it's not like, a military situation is different. Military, they want to make everybody feel the same. It's a different mindset, and there's command chain and hierarchy and stuff like that. But in teams that I'm involved in, it's different. We look at those differences as massive strengths. And also, you can get into differences too, just people's backgrounds and diversity and culture and what country are they from, and all kinds of things that can play into strengths that gives you perspective on a team. So this one, I thought this was this is a tweet that was shared internally at some point, and I picked it up and kept it. But this goes back to helping others, and this isn't just about this doesn't have to be about developers. You could change this with project manager and strategist and any other job. But if you're just if you're just kind of in your zone, and that's great, you get in your zone, and I want developers to be in their zone and not be interrupted and have focus for hours, because I think they need that. But the reality too is that there's some point a developer knows, hey, I need to take a break now, or whatever you do in your job. At some point you're ready to take a break. Well, that's a great time to see in the help channels or something, somebody needs some help. Nobody answered them, I'm gonna jump back in and help them out. And I just thought this was awesome. And I don't even remember, Steve Kenny is probably some famous developer working for some famous company. I don't remember, somebody in here may know who that is, I can't remember, but I really thought he was onto something there. You know, if they're stuck and you're just doing your thing and not reaching out, then his opinion is you're actively hurting the team. You know, I don't think it's intended usually, but I think that can be the result. All right, these are super small, probably for folks in the back, but I'm going to go through these and I'll read them to make sure everybody knows what we're talking here. But this is really from the how to be a great teammate perspective. These are the things that I think are key points that really can help. And if you instill this in a team through work and experimentation, being creative, then I do believe that you'll have a great team and you'll build a great team. And it really has to do with leaders setting that. You know, I do believe that the leaders, you know, you hear people say this a lot, well, it's got to start at the top, and that's usually true. Like, if someone at the top of an organization doesn't believe what you're trying to do, it's going to always cause conflict. You know, if they're not for that, you're going to have this conflict that's always there. And so, you know, whoever is in lead of a team, it's the same kind of deal. You've got to you know, whatever you're setting and whatever you're showing, whatever you do, you know, if you tell, this is a great example, if you tell people, hey, you know, I want people having great work-life balance, and you shouldn't be pinging people in Slack, you know, at night and all that stuff. Like, if you say that, but then you're doing that, like, you know, it's hard to, people are going to be like, well, I'm getting mixed messages. Should I be working? I'm feeling guilty. You know, you create a lot of weird things on a team with that. So, just as an example. So the first one here is be more empathetic and don't assume intent. I think this has a lot to unpack, but and be more empathetic is a little gimmicky, I admit, because that sounds like all right, how do you be more empathetic? Well, this is something you have to work on. It's a personality related thing. Some people generally, you know, just by nature, that's easy for them. Some people it's more of a challenge. So I think it's something you have to reflect on. How to approach that, but ultimately you're trying to understand and have a understanding of where other people on your team are coming from when they say words. What does that mean from their perspective? And that has to do with knowing them well. And the assumed intent is related because, and this can happen with remote companies a lot, or you have remote staff, which is common. It's the future. That's where we're headed. You know, I think people are realizing that, but when we type into little internet boxes all day long, and that's what a lot of us do, one way or another, no matter what our jobs are, we're typing in little text boxes. And you can say 2 words, 3 words, 4 words in a sentence, and one person reads it as, oh, that's cool, that makes sense. The other person reads it, what did he mean by that? What does that mean? You know, so I try, and maybe a better way to put that too is like not assume intent, but not assume, you know, malicious intent. You know, you've put the word malicious in there. I really try to like read stuff and just, even if it kind of ruffles my feathers a little bit, go, you know, they probably really didn't mean it that way, and I just need to let that go. That's me and my insecurities getting in the way of that. That's not them. It's not their problem. It's my problem. You need to listen and value the input of and opinions of others. People see that you show value in it when you listen, when you can repeat back what they said and you can reiterate what they're, you know, what they've just said to you when you listen. And also the value is actually taking input from them and actually using that on the team to make the team better. Obviously, we don't want to take input as leaders we think is incorrect and use it, but we can also explain why we think it's incorrect and talk through it. Having those conversations are fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and you should be direct about that. Understand it's okay to be wrong, ask for help. We talked about asking for help. I think the other part of that is understanding it's okay to be wrong. This is one that is tough for me. I don't like to be wrong. Does anybody in here like to be wrong? I don't know if Dan enjoys being wrong. but I'm sure there's people that definitely like. I think when you truthfully are like that, and Dan, I think you probably are. When you get to that point, and you can raise your hand and say, "I like to be wrong." That's probably a sign of maturity from the standpoint of you like it from the standpoint that you realize that you are going to be wrong, and that you enjoy what comes out of that. And what comes out of that is you learn something because you can move forward. And I think that's cool. And we're all at different places, and we relapse sometimes into patterns that we have to break out of. So I think that's great. We can definitely keep that in mind. Hold each other accountable. Learn from mistakes kind of plays into the previous. And accountability is, again, people say, we need to be accountable. How many times have managers said this? Team's got to be accountable. What does that mean? What does a team doesn't understand what that means. They got to be accountable. So what you have to do is you have to explain to the team, this is what I mean by accountability. We're going to do scrum check-ins. We're going to talk through, in that scrum check-in, it's not a negative, it's a positive, but we have to do that. So we make sure everybody in the team's doing what they said they're going to do. If you're having trouble, you're holding yourself accountable to the team by saying, I ran into this trouble, I need some help. That's part of it, it's fine. Communicate effectively and appropriately. And that sounds like buzzwords doesn't that sound like something you see in the annual review? Shrop communicated effectively and appropriately. I give him a neutral. I don't know, did he? It's hard to tell. But that's something that is certainly a team. These are all individual things, and it depends on the people that's made up of the team, what that means. But I think a team, we're really saying that a team needs to have an agreement on what does that mean. And effectively might mean, in my opinion, I promote, and I just did a podcast on this. It's in the Shropcast. Tom, you're talking about that, the latest episode, but I'm a real proponent of don't do DMs much. Don't do direct messages. Stay out of the direct message land. I like more stuff. There are places for them. I talk about that. There's places for direct messages. There's things you shouldn't be saying, in an open, more open team channel. But I think in your chat systems, I really am a proponent of communicating more openly, because you may be having a conversation. Two examples. You may have a conversation on a team where, let's say that 2 developers are working through an issue. And if they did that in a DM, that would just be between them. If they're in the open channel, someone else may say, oh, I dealt with this last week. Here's how I dealt with it. And it can the efficiency just skyrockets because you had one other person jump into that conversation and help. The other example I've seen happen a lot is where you've got a couple, you could have 2 folks, maybe it's a project manager and a lead architect, and they're talking through stuff, or their lead developer, and they're going, well, we've got to work on this thing, and the client's not happy, or the client's happy, and we don't know why they're happy. I don't know, whatever the conversation is. And I think it's easy to fall into let's do all that in DM land, but I think sometimes it's really great to see to show the team how leaders of a team solve problems and work through things, even if it's hard. I think that's a good thing.
Hey, Shrop.
Yeah.
So kind of related to that, I was thinking this idea of whether it's direct message or even I was putting the chat, the open chat systems in the same category. But for me, sometimes over a text, whether it's whatever platform,
yeah, it doesn't matter.
It's easy to get that what are they saying? What you were saying, for me, I feel like sometimes picking up the phone is the best thing. I still feel like there's I can express myself. I really don't like what you said, and I think you're wrong, but I don't really want to call you out in the chat room.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure you understand, my perspective on this. I feel like you could have that conversation verbally better than on a chat. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. Part of my introvertedness, I'm allergic to phone calls, highly allergic to phone. But that's my personal problem. Yeah. I've had to overcome that. And I agree with you, because I think there is huge value in that. And I've fought for years, people let's just get a call. And I get, you always run into people that want to do a call for everything. So I think there's balance, because I think calls can lead into how's the weather, how's everything going with the family, that stuff's important, and you should have that time. But I think it can, there's a balance there. You have to figure out the team. I really agree. I saw a post, Gary Vaynerchuk posted the other day something like the value of the 3-minute call. And if you can really hold it to 3 minutes, I think that's key. But I think for what you're talking about is exactly what he's getting at in that phrase. Short call can just change everything, because you get, and if it's a video call, it's even better. You get body language, you get the inflection of the voice. It's a different level of communication than the little internet boxes.
I was just thinking of an example this past week. I had a person, an external partner that I'm working with, and they have really messed up some stuff, and I've asked them to fix it for months. So anyway, she finally sends me an email, and I'm going to respond, but it's hard not to sound like I'm really like annoyed at you. Like every time I wrote it, I reread it, I was like, this could easily be taken as like an escalation of conflict or something. But at the same time, I had to get those facts out there. And I did, but I immediately called her up. And I figured hopefully I'll catch her and I can explain what she's going to see in her inbox. I just felt like if I just sent the email, there was a chance it could go wrong.
Yeah. That's a good call. And the email you've got written documentation to back what you said, which is helpful when it doesn't get fixed again, and if it happens. The one thing you missed from that description of what happened that I bet happened, I bet you did this, but you didn't say it, and I think it's an important one, is that you probably waited a little bit before you wrote the email, because I think that's important.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're...
I think, I really try to not, I've had enough experiences where one wrong word like this, ruins the tone or whatever.
Yeah, the way...
I try to be careful.
Yeah, and I think that's it's easy to like immediately want to go, I'm writing this thing and we're straightening this out, or I'm busy and I need to get through this.
Well,
but
in that case, if I tell my people this, there's very few things that can't wait for overnight. So if you want to fire off that email, just save it as a draft. Come back and read it in the morning.
And see, how do you feel about reading it in the morning? I bet you feel like,
Especially when you're sober.
Yeah, wasn't that big a deal? I mean, I think my wife's a nurse, and she literally does things. She has literally saved lives. Like, not kidding. And all nurses and a lot of medical people and things and a lot of jobs do that, EMTs and stuff. And I told her, like, this level of responsibility she has is insane. Like, and I told her, I said, I'm just thankful that what I do, like, I'd have to really stretch to figure out how I could hurt anyone, like physically at least. And I'm thankful for that. Like, I'm not wired to be in that level. I'm glad she is. We need those people. But that's a good point. So giving authentic praise is another key here. And what I mean by that, authentic is a key word. You hear that thrown around a lot. And all that means is you need to feel and mean what you say. Don't just, if you read a manager book or you read some leadership book or whatever books, some Gary Vaynerchuk book or whoever you like to follow, and you read their book and, watch some TED Talk, and they said, well, I read this, went to a conference. I've literally seen managers, they go to a conference, they come back, and they sell something, and they're like, I'm going to do these things because this person said, do these things, and I check them off my list, and it's very methodical. It's great, they're trying, but it's not real, and people pick up on that. So what you really want to do is, when you praise people, and you should, as a team, people need to hear that. And everybody, by the way, is different. Some people need zero praise, and you'll figure those people out. And some people get really weirded out when they're praised. Some people get weirded out in a way where they may, if you talk to them, they don't want that, and you're like, okay, well, I'm still probably going to do it, but I'll do it lighter. And then some people say, I don't like it, and they're lying. They really like it, and they want it, and that's fine. So being real and understanding your team and all that, I think that's real important. It's easy to get busy and not thank people for what they've done, and I think that's the important thing. Encourage and respect each other. These are good reflection points, because I think we see that in code of conducts, and we see that in a lot of other documents floating around, in communities and things like that. Encourage and respect others. Well, what does that mean, really, right? It means different things to different people. So I think that's another great point of reflection and how that works. But I think ultimately, you can do that by getting to know people. If you know the people on your team well, as well as they'll let you know, and again, there's boundaries. Everyone has boundaries. Some people hey, it's work stuff. That's just the way I am. That's fine. You let them be. But getting to know people, you can't help but grow and have a mutual respect over time. You can't help but grow into a mode where you can encourage them and they encourage you. So it will happen naturally, but you have to get to know each other. It's harder on remote teams. It's just a challenge, but it can be done. And again, embracing each other's strengths and weaknesses. I should change that to just say embrace each other's strengths. I really like focus on the strengths because the weaknesses don't. We hear that a lot. Like, what's your biggest weakness in these interview questions? You know, what's your biggest weakness? I don't really care. If I'm interviewing somebody, I could care less what their weakness is. I want to know what are your strengths. Because we all know you have weaknesses, but like you probably have three really high level strengths that I care about knowing. And the rest of the weaknesses don't even matter at that point. So I mentioned experiment. I think just being creative, like building a team, I think being creative and experiment, what that's about is thinking about your team individually, the makeup of your team, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, and think about new ways to try things out. Let me try this experiment, just like people do in SEO and SEM. Like we're going to experiment with some new way to improve some goal on a website, right? Well, we can do that with a team. We can say we've got a goal. I'm going to try to do this and see if it impacts the team in a positive manner. So feel free to do that. So I kind of want to wrap up here about our competitive advantage, and this is Media Current's competitive advantage, and I don't mind talking about this because I think we do it great. I think we do it awesome. That's my opinion. I'm biased. But I also think it's everybody in this room, everybody that has teams, everybody that's trying to do this kind of stuff. I think it's also your competitive advantage. It's a shared competitive advantage because I think most teams do this stuff terrible. That's why I care about talking about it. I think they try. I think there's good intention, but I think it's hard, and that's why it's the challenge. So if you really focus on the things we're talking about today, it can turn into a competitive advantage, whatever that means in your situation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this came up in the friends inside my computer. Those guys yesterday in the talk got into this. This is a good way that at Media Current we've kind of wrapped up our culture and what is important, what is the competitive advantage, and the key point for that is culture and really talent and quality and those types of words. But we're always working on what does that mean and how we can make that better. And what I'm interested in is how culture is not a gimmicky thing, but how is it real? What does that really mean? How do we define it? So that's just a graphic that somebody made in the company that I thought was kind of cool. So one thing I thought about here, and when we talk about caring, this kind of came to mind this week. This was a slide that I kind of added recently, but I really thought about, because really caring about each other on the team and all that at whatever level people are comfortable with and can handle. I think some of the things that make that up, to me, I feel like there's compassion. We're all human. There's action. That means there's actual steps. Caring is not just this thing that you just do. It's not as easy for some people. What does it mean? We get into those things. There's some action. There's things we're talking about today. This is how you do that. You create empathy. You praise people. You encourage people. So there's action involved, and there's respect, and there's empathy. So I think those are key aspects to really wrapping up a lot of what we're talking about today. And then this is in my mind, this is a little easier to break down, I guess, some of the way I look at culture pieces here. When we talk about from kind of my perspective and my daily work, it's the people that make the competitive advantage. It's funny, I even feel weird saying that. It's the people, but it really is. So lots of people can write code. Lots of people can manage projects in the world. There's billions of people in the world. Think about the competition there. There's a lot that can be done. A lot of talented people. There's many, many more talented people than myself out there. What makes it different is I think how you put the teams together, how you put the people together, how you get things done, and value that you've produced. Doesn't matter if it's a product, a startup, an agency. None of that matters. It's right. How are you getting there? So start with a talented team, and That doesn't mean everyone's at the same level. It means you focus on those strengths to build the team. You've provided growth opportunities through leadership and mentorship, so people feel like they're growing or have the opportunity. And by the way, not everybody on your team is going to want to grow. I didn't mention that. I know people on my teams that are like, I'm fine where I'm at. I don't want to grow. And I totally respect that. And I think that's fine. That's where they're at now. I don't think that's where they're always going to be at. And I'm still going to be pushing them to grow in certain ways, finding what's that thing they really want to grow. Because I don't believe they really don't want to grow. They don't want to do anything. I think they've created in their mind whatever that looks like. So I'm fine with that. Like, that's where they're at. And I don't want to negatively impact. If things are grooving along great, let it happen for now. But I said for now because it's gonna change. And then authenticity and transparency. You want to just make sure all those squishy things we talked about, around being real, being honest, those types of words, all of those play into that piece. And it's always humorous, the icons I've picked. We have an icon library for decks and stuff, so it's like, authenticity, butterfly seems fine. I don't know. It feels authentic, what's happening. And then the last one is, this is one that is on my mind from a perspective, but client team integration. A lot of times, and I would say this is true for startups, product teams within companies and agencies. In some fashion or another, we have other teams that integrate with our teams in some fashion. It could be a client in an agency standpoint that has developers and strategists and designers. Could also be a product team where maybe the company has a core product team, but then you've reached out and you've contracted somebody else to help. There's always some integration going on. So I think the key here is being able to integrate well. So I take, a lot of our clients don't even know it's happening, but I'll take exactly what I'm applying to our teams internally, and I'll start to apply it to the client teams and say, this is, I'm going to treat you like I treat everybody else. We're going to do this thing together, and I'll see how far I can push it. And sometimes there's resistance, and you can only go so far. It's that other team, and they've got their own pressures, their own management and leadership styles. But I try to really make sure they see it like, hey, we're all working together to get to the goal. So I think that's a fun challenge always. Q&A. I think we've got a little bit of time for Q&A. Yeah.
Hard as you try, they just don't get along, and they just everybody knows, it's kind of quiet about it. How do you get that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So he was asking, how do you help out when you've got two team members who just can't seem to get along? And it sounds like you've tried things and you still can't get along.
It comes in waves. We try something, it might work, and then they settle back in other ways, just not passive aggressively. It's frustrating.
Yeah. How direct have you been with them? Like, has it been pretty direct? Like, as far as like how it affects the rest of the team when they see that?
What's interesting is I have a problem team into it.
Yeah.
But I will have a conversation with each other individually. That's the point is where we kind of all sat down. It's hard because one of them is remote. So we have to use it.
Have you done, if they're remote, have you done things like the camps here where they've been together in person? Okay. I mean, that kind of thing can help sometimes.
It's interesting because the personalities, they're okay, like they like each other, but it's the way they work together. They don't respect the way each other work, and they're both kind of separate. Don't like change, so it's...
Oh, yeah. That's always a challenge. I mean, there can be times if a thing gets... Some toxic situations I've dealt with, it can become so toxic where one person has to leave. Two people have to leave. That's an extreme, right? That's one option. And that's not dealing with it. That's when you've exhausted a lot of other things, obviously. And the team's hurting. You cannot let the team hurt because two people are arguing and bickering about things. So you have to fix it one way or the other. The other thing that can happen is, if it becomes a situation where it's like, it's more professional differences, like I don't think your quality's up. I don't like how your code's not. I don't. Whatever. They might be legitimate too. Some of the complaints might be legitimate, but whatever those are, there can be times where it's like, if it's possible, have them on different teams, some separation. can help.
Yeah, we try to separate that projects working on it.
I mean, that sounds like a good way, especially it sounds like you value them still. So it's you want to keep them. So I think separation is good, and I think if they get along personally, that's one thing. And I think I wouldn't say it's easier, but if you can get to the bottom of like what are those professional differences are, and then try to chip away at that and say, hey, we need to appreciate each other's differences. Do we think that we're both good enough to do the job? All right, we get agreement from everybody.
I think that's the thing.
Oh, good point.
Okay, yeah, that's totally easy.
There's no easy fix. Those are some of the tools, but don't. Yeah, they need to understand. I think it is going to impact the team negatively. That's one thing I didn't talk about. It'd be great to have a slide on that. But toxic team members, it can. I don't like to focus on the negative. I like to be more optimistic. But like it can be a detriment. Like it can kill a team in a project so quick that you just can't have that. But it sounds like you're trying to deal with it. So that's the first step. Ignoring it. You're not ignoring it. That's the thing. A lot of times people want to ignore it because as leaders, we don't want to deal with it. We just want everything to be happy. Can't you all get along? It doesn't work like that. It's not life. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I guess just like sometimes I'll give an answer to something and I'm totally wrong, right? But
Sure.
I guess sometimes I struggle with like, well, maybe I shouldn't say anything because maybe I'll be wrong. But trying to just find out like where that balance is, like wanting to help other people, but maybe not having the right answer.
I mean, I struggle with it too. I so bad want to help people that I have to hold back trying not to answer. Sam's in here, and Sam probably is like, freaking answer all the time. Stop it. I only do that because I want to help people and I want to help them move along. But what I'm working on with one of my mentors, who's one of my bosses, we have bunches of bosses, lots of boss people, but they're good, and I've taken his lead. He said something that stuck with me. He says, and he does this, it's Kevin Bassarab, KB, we call him, but he purposefully, and this was great, he knows the answers to lots of stuff. He's a smart guy. He purposely just doesn't answer a lot of times. He'll just let it sit out there for a while, which is, I'm just more of the style of like apt to like help people immediately, keep them moving and all that. And so I'm trying to do more of that where it's like, let other people answer, let it, sometimes even letting somebody sit with a question and then putting the question out there in Slack or something seems like it solves it by them saying it out loud and then reading it. Like, though I've seen so many times people come back and like, never mind, I figured it out. And it's like just the process of them writing it out into words, the problem helped them solve it. They didn't really, it was rhetorical at that point. They didn't need the answer. So, but I'm the same way. I answer things wrong all the time and you get a little embarrassed and I just have to let that go and go, that was wrong. I'm making it sound easy, but it's not necessarily easy to, like we talked about, to be wrong. You just have to, it's a thing that everyone has to work on. But I think you just keep, with those things in mind, I think you just keep doing it. And, if you help people move along, I think they appreciate it. And I'm sure they appreciate you, Dan, and the teams, regardless. Because they're wrong too. That's the thing. We don't ever think about, we think everyone else is right. We get into this self-esteem mode, right? Everyone else is fine, but not us. No, but it happens too.
I find that I don't always have to answer the problem. Most of the time what I end up doing is I try and point people just in the right direction. And that's all that they really need. It's not finding the exact answer.
Good point.
It's just say, have you tried something in this direction? Or, go this way with it. Or, Shrop might know something about that. That's what I'll say. And then it's just pointing them to a direction to go. And that gets them unlocked. It's not necessarily taking 45 minutes out of your day to just sit down and work out the problem specific to them.
It doesn't necessarily mean a pair programming session to break your workflow, and that's a great point, because I think a lot of times when someone asks something, I've noticed, whether it's me or whoever answered, that maybe we've dealt with it, but it's been so long we don't remember exactly what the answer was. But we're like, but that direction can help, because you can say, I dealt with this. I don't remember exactly, but it was something to do with this. And here's the D.O page that had that, or, you know, whatever it is.
Like I wasn't searching for these specific keywords, and so just targeting whatever gets it from the point of that. Okay, now I'm searching for making more sense.
Exactly. I'm happy to do questions, you know, rest of the day and talk through. But thanks for coming. Oh, no, I appreciate everybody coming. Honestly, thank you.